It's Friday, we're back, the Premier Pundits. We're looking at attacking assets ahead of game week 27. Of course, it's me, Ben Dinnery, and my esteemed co-host, the Statman himself, Mr. Jason McKenna.
Yeah, Ben, it's great to be back on, as always, part of our daily content at the moment here on Premier Injuries. I think you might give yourself an injury there. You're shaking your head so much. But as always, I kind of remind people before we go into this, please do like, share and subscribe to the channel at the moment. It's free to do. It helps us out. And I think there's a lot of good stuff for you to enjoy. We've got the Fantasy Doctor. We've got some data breakdowns. And of course, we do have our FPL content as well. And one of my highlights of my week is also Tactic Thursday. I do recommend you check those videos out. They're a little bit more deep diving into individual teams and drilling into certain subjects. But as always, we are focusing on FPL this Friday. What I also think is quite an interesting starting point before we get into the discussions, Ben, and maybe you've noticed this as well, but I lay plans in my head. I don't like to make transfers early too much, especially at the moment, but I think of teams going into good kinds of runs, good data, and then all of a sudden a plethora of injuries come along and steamroller all my plans. Is this something that you're finding at the moment as well, Ben?
I'm always wary. I'm always holding back and trying not to make any decisions until the last minute, till I have all that information to hand. Generally, my squad is been coping quite well. So decisions around transfers have been because I've wanted to change things up, not because I've been forced down a certain route. I think the last big injury that I've really had to contend with was Ross Barkley. And other than that, like I say, I've managed pretty well. My team's pretty crap, but at least I haven't had any injuries.
Everybody's fit and healthy, but they're just not playing too good, which is the story at the moment. It's just, for me, it's quite a fascinating point that a few weeks ago, I was kind of waxing lyrical about Leicester. I had a real focus on the Foxes. I thought some great targets there. And then Barnes, Maddison, Johnny Evans, all these kind of huge injuries. And of course, James Justin to the side there. And all of a sudden now I'm thinking I won't be keeping my eyes on them. I won't be interested in them at all. I think that is my kind of discussion point there. Grealish as well, a huge kind of dint in the armour that was Aston Villa. Now I think a little bit of the data is catching up with them. But one person that I think is maybe one that the community might be wanting to look at very soon is Mason Mount. Now, in the defensive discussions, I talked about Chelsea having quite a good run of fixtures, and Mason Mount, I think, is the only player in that team at the moment in the attacking lineup that you can probably rely on. He has started most of the games under Tuchel, but not all of them, and that is where the worry is. Defensively, we kind of identified a few people that have started every game under Tuchel, and you can trust in them. But I think as well, the talent of Mount and his importance to Chelsea, I think Tuchel does understand, and maybe he will start from now on. But he himself is, doing great in terms of attacking numbers. 3 goals, 2.35 XGI, and 11 chances created in his last 4 games. I think he's looked bright. He has been so important for Chelsea because he got that all-important winner against Liverpool this week as well. I think he's a great way into a team that is working on improving their front line, but also, as I said there, they'll be going into the end of the season, hopefully pushing for a Champions League place and trying to vie for that. So is he somebody that is on your horizon, Ben? Is he somebody that has tickled your fancy? Because I think Chelsea are going to be a team that we do have to look at very soon.
Very much so. Mount is involved in my teams on other platforms. I do share your reservations with regards to Tuchel and this tinkering of his team. I mean, I think it was only last week or maybe, that I sort of tipped up Marcus Alonso as a player who looked to have nailed down that left wing back spot in the absence of Ben Chilwell. And here we are 7 days later, and Chilwell's started back-to-back games and had back-to-back Chelsea clean sheets. So you talk about the best laid plans, often go up in smoke. In terms of that front line, then yes, Mason Mount looks the most likely to start. We thought the rate was on the wall when Tuchel first came in, took over from Lampard, and Mount was benched. And we've seen sort of, was this a reaction to suggestion in the media that it was his blue-eyed boy, and Tuchel was really stamping his authority within that squad. But, he's emerged as one of Tuchel's key players. And of course, he got the goal against Liverpool at Anfield on Thursday evening. And, he's putting himself in a position where he's going to make it very hard for, Tuchel to drop him from that starting 11.
Yeah, it is. It's a difficult discussion and something to keep an eye on, but I think he is the best way into a much improved Chelsea side. And as I said, there is a good fixture run going forward. Game week 27, Everton, that is highlighted red on the kind of fixture difficulty ratings in some of them. But then I think Everton haven't been great defensively through this season. They might have improved a little bit over the last 3, but then they let in 3 against Manchester United. These are all relatively recent results where they haven't been great. Then there's Leeds, West Brom, Crystal Palace, Brighton. West Ham, I think, will be more difficult. Fulham might be hard because obviously they're vying for places towards the end of the season, but Mount can pick up points in these sorts of games. It is a fairly nice run into the end of the season. The only problem is that obviously game week 29 there is the blank, but for somebody like me, I will be playing my free hit, so I think he's not a bad shout at all. In terms of somebody that I mentioned there, West Ham, I think a lot of people have questioned Antonio. Now obviously this game week they are playing Leeds, but going forward some people have actually questioned should they be having Antonio in their side, because they play Man United, Arsenal, Wolves, Leicester, Newcastle, Chelsea up until game week 33. And then from 33 onwards, there is a good run because there is a sea of green and some great fixtures there. But I think with Antonio, his amazing attacking data has continued against the likes of Manchester City. Indeed, the West Ham side were one of only 4 teams this season to accrue more XG than Man City in a Premier League game. And during that time as well, Antonio has accumulated the most XG and the second most big chances. So I think he's fine to own. I think he's probably one of the only strikers that you can look at and say the fixtures don't matter. It's actually fitness that is the thing that might cost Antonio. So if, somebody is chatting to you about that, Ben, would you say keep the faith in Antonio? Because at the moment he is fit, he is in form, and until we know that he's definitely got an injury, it'd be a bit careless to take him out for any other reason.
Very much so. I'm confident in Antonio this week. If I didn't have me set and forget in place, he would be my captain. He is, again, in other formats. West Ham down to 1 fixture per week. The issues are not necessarily, the games themselves. It's how quick the team is required to turn around. And, if you're getting 5, 6, 7 days rest, or even more on some occasion, there shouldn't be any concerns whatsoever with regards to putting Antonio on your team. And, you've reeled off a list of fixtures there. I just reiterate, I think we're coming into part of a season where almost fixture difficulty goes out the window. Doesn't really mean a great deal to me. You look at that Manchester United game flagged as a red hard game. I wouldn't back United defensively. I wouldn't say they're a solid defensive unit. Arsenal, the same, more than capable of conceding, a couple of goals there. Wolves, Newcastle, Leicester decimated by injury. There's nothing there that all the way maybe until Chelsea. That would certainly frighten me. And there's a lot can happen between sort of now and that Chelsea game, which is down in game week 33. So, look, I own Lingard, and I think I'll be doubling up on West Ham assets with Antonio.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing, and it might be going against the grain, but they're a team in form. Maybe the fixtures aren't unside, but when you look at kind of top 4 or top 6 teams, traditionally you kind of go with them even if they've got difficult fixtures because they're just that good. And frankly, West Ham are a top 4, top 6 side this season. They've been absolutely fantastic, and Antonio is the peak of that West Ham team. And just, looking at last year as well, 2020, Antonio had the best XG, I think, per 90 of any player in the Premier League. So, he's got a year of fantastic data to back that up. This isn't anomalous. This isn't some weird phenomenon that's just happened over the last few weeks. He's been consistently good for a long while now. Now, there is the debate in the community about whether to keep Fernandes or Salah. I'll just give my quick opinion on that, and then Ben will have yours. So, in my opinion, I think if you're going to do it short term, I think it's not a bad shout to get rid of Fernandes. But these are the sort of kind of discussions that you have to look at your team and think, who are you going to replace them with, and make sure to kind of have that money in your team to be able to bring them back in. Because the thing is, a premium switch isn't always a bad thing. We do know how good Fernandes is this season, but then you also do have to look at the fact that against top 6 sides, he's only got 1 goal, and that is a penalty against the traditional Big Six this season. And in fact, he's not even created a big chance in those games. Over the last 4 game weeks as well, his own numbers have regressed. Man United's attacking numbers have regressed. They've done well defensively, but that seems like so many teams this season, good defensive performances are coming at a detriment to the attack. And what I would say as well, going forward from this game week, it is a difficult run for Man United. Game week 27, Man City. Game week 28, that aforementioned good West Ham side. Game week 29, a blank. Game week 30, Brighton, who ebb and flow. And then it's Tottenham. From game week 32 onwards, you could probably justify him. But at the moment, he's not hitting the points. He's not getting those points in. And you could get somebody a bit better in for the same amount of money. And then with Salah as well, what is interesting for me is that Liverpool have one of the nicest run-ins to the season. But the flip side for Liverpool is, they've got the good fixtures, but they've just not been having any good numbers themselves. They've not been scoring. And once again, it's kind of hard to justify having him in. But with Salah, the numbers are kind of there to actually say he has been unlucky so far. You kind of look at the fact that he's taken quite a few shots in the box. So there is this worry, this narrative kind of looming that Salah has struggled against bottom half of the table teams. It's his 6th lack of return against any bottom half of the table side. But then looking at his kind of stats over the last few game weeks, they're not bad. Since game week 19, he has an XGI of 5.9. He has 4.4 XG and 4 goals scored, 20 shots inside the box, which is 3rd best. So there is some more underlying data which is slightly better than maybe Fernandes, and it's the fixtures as well. So if you're asking me, I would keep Salah and get rid of Fernandes, but Fernandes only for the short term. And this is something I'm genuinely considering if I do wildcard. But do you have more misgivings about that, Ben?
I'm with you with the pick. Given the performance against Chelsea and given the chatter around, why or the rationale behind Jurgen Klopp withdrawing Mo Salah, if he's to be believed, to protect him. He said he looked a little bit fatigued. It's something that doesn't happen very often. And I think I read at the time, it was the earliest Mo Salah has been substituted at Anfield since he arrived at the club. I think it was going back to maybe 2014. like that. But it's so that was a little bit of an anomaly with regards to Mo Salah. But for me as well, there's always a concern. These elite premium players are more than capable of producing on any given day. And if you're talking about a Manchester derby, then there's no bigger platform, and somebody like Bruno could come out and perform. You're also talking about players who are on set pieces, spot kicks. That can change in the blink of an eye. And we talked about teams in form, or teams like Manchester City who can transcend fixtures. I think elite players transcend fixtures. And look, if Bruno went out and got himself a couple of goals at the weekend, that wouldn't surprise you. The same with Salah. However, if I was to ditch one of the two, then it would be Bruno. Reluctantly, I think. I mean, I'm a non-owner, and I'm glad I'm a non-owner because I don't have that decision to make. But I think I would prefer Salah over Bruno, given the fixtures, given the form of the two sides. I think Diogo Jota coming back into that Liverpool squad as well may just keep that front three on their toes a little bit, adds a little bit freshness. If he can replicate anything like the form that he had pre-injury, then Liverpool could, bounce back from this recent sort of downturn and maybe put a string of performances together.
Now, somebody that might replace these two in our teams is one Mr. Sir Harold Kane. The last 2 game weeks, he's put in phenomenal data. 13 shots in the box, 2.8 XG and 3.09 XGI. Those watching the Fulham game will know that Kane was frustrated because he should have put some of those opportunities away. But for me, him not putting those opportunities away is so rare, and it kind of fills me a little bit with confidence because he is getting them. Tottenham have been in poor form. I've kind of said this for a while, but this is Kane kind of returning back to himself. Good fixture run, and people kind of talk about maybe with Arsenal Europa League worries because of rotation, but Kane basically starts week in, week out for Tottenham, sometimes at detriment for his form, but he's not a rotation risk. And posting data like that, especially with the short-term good fixtures, with this discussion of maybe Fernandes versus having him in your side, it's enticing for me. And I think that this might be a good time to actually get him in, because I don't think Bale at the moment is a good one to own, because we know his injury history. We know that Mourinho has still said that he isn't really capable of keeping up those appearances. Son and Kane have this kind of electric connection, but Kane seems to be more involved with the goals for so many other reasons. So I think at the moment I'm not focusing just on that Crystal Palace game this weekend, because obviously it is enticing, but that's too short-termism for me. It's the fact that they're playing quite a good few fixtures over the next few game weeks, and there is that game week 29 fixture as well for them against Aston Villa during the blank. So for people that might be rearranging their teams for game week 29, I think he's a good shout as well. But is that the right decision where to put your money, Ben? Or would you be putting that Fernandes money elsewhere?
I do like Harry Kane, and if you want to play the percentages, you're talking about a striker who I think Premier League appearances, 1 in the last 4, 2 in the last 6. So that's not great by Harry's high standards. So again, just by the law of averages, he will be back on that scoring trail sooner rather than later. You've got that underlying data which supports that Harry Kane, is or has returned to maybe his pre-injury performance levels without maybe getting, the points returns in terms of FPL. So, it's hard not to like Harry Kane. Like I say, it's more maybe that I don't like Tottenham, in the style of play, but like it's Harry again. He's on spot kicks. he's their talisman. He's the big player, and with Son and Bale as well. I just think maybe that alleviates some of the pressure, that occupies some of those defenses a little bit more when Harry's around, and maybe creates a little bit more space. And you kind of keep somebody of his ilk and quality down for too long. So yeah, I'm not talking anybody out bringing Harry Kane into the side.
Now, another player that does play in white and in London, but he is a cottager. So Ademola Lookman, I think, is an interesting bright spark in a Fulham midfield a Fulham attack that has actually improved of late. The team actually have the most chances created in their last 4 game weeks, and actually they have the second best XG over this period as well, but only 4 goals scored. So there is that bit of kind of underperformance, but we would probably expect that from Fulham anyway. But in terms of the Fulham attack, Lookman is the one that is involved in all those movements. And what I would say is from game week 29, I'm seriously considering him, if I play my wild card, as a kind of cheap enabler in my team. At 5 million, I think he's a fairly good own. You don't have to play him every week, but there are some good fixtures for Fulham, and his good underlying data there is there as well to back up. But the other thing is that this kind of foible that happens in the Premier League, but I think it happens across all leagues, is when a team have something to play for, they do play better towards the end of the season. And we've kind of said this, it's a phrase that you've used, the business end of the season is coming up. Those last few games, Fulham are going to be fighting tooth and nail to stay up and prove themselves as a Premier League side. And it's showing. Their data has improved. Over the last 5 game weeks, they produced 16 chances. He has himself produced 16 chances, an XG of 1.12, but an XGI 2.82 in the last 6. I think there's some impressive underlying numbers for Lookman, and I think just as a differential cheap enabler for your team to maybe get some of those other big guns into your side for that run up to the end of the season, I don't hate it as a choice at all. I think you can mix him in with the likes of somebody like Rafinha, who again is nicely priced, but the games for Leeds are actually much tougher in that game week period. So maybe you could move from a Rafinha to a Lookman and give yourself that little bit extra, and then jump on Leeds from game week 34 onwards. I mean, what is your kind of thinking on that one, Ben?
Yeah, I do like Fulham. From a defensive aspect, I think they've got that solid foundation, and that allows those forwards maybe a little bit of freedom to express themselves. You've got that solid back 6, which doesn't really produce much going forward, but what it does allow is that front 4, to really just focus on what they do best. And of those, Lookman is producing, the outstanding stats from that Fulham side. And at that price, like you say, you can take a punt. You're not really losing out too much. We're going to be coming up to a part of the season where teams are going to be on the beach, as it were, playing in their flip-flops. If Fulham had got a result against Tottenham on Thursday night, they would have actually, moved out of that drop zone on goal difference ahead of Newcastle. So Scott Parker knows that it's the win within grasp. It's a couple of wins, and especially since Steve Bruce's side's on the slide, he's going to be drilling that into his players. Look at what we're doing. A little bit unfortunate to at least not get a point against Tottenham. A dubious disallowed goal, which actually prompted a rule change today in terms of the handball law. So that's how that Scott Parker will be massively disappointed that it was his team and his player that it came up that prompted that rule change. But look, the confidence will still be high, the belief will be there, and like you see, you've got, it's two ends of the opposite ends of the spectrum here. One, you've got Fulham from the outside look as if they're playing and fighting for Scott Parker, whereas you've got some off the pitch turmoil going on at Newcastle, and players clearly unhappy with the regime up there. So One's on, in the ascendancy, and the other one, well, who knows? Could be on their way to championship level football.
I hope not, for your sake, because obviously, because we're so close, I do have that affinity for Newcastle anyway. Now, the last two that I want to talk about are two Brazilians that are bursting at the seams with brilliance at the moment, but one I think is kind of at risk for not playing, and one is certainly going to be in their side. The first one is Gabriel Jesus, and the reason why I bring him up is because he's got amazing data, but the flip side is Aguero is sniffing down his neck at making that return. If he was an assured starter, he'd be a fantastic own, because in the last 6 game weeks, he has the third best XGI, best XG of any player in the league. He has so many shots in the box, and he has 4 goals as well to kind of match his XG for once. He's actually matching some of his data. Maybe he's putting it together because he knows that this is almost a make or break time for him. The pressure is good for Jesus in this instance. The second one, the second Brazilian in the same position, is Richarlison. And the thing is, Everton appear to have the 5th best fixtures over the next 6, but I think some of those good green fixtures that we're looking at are a little bit misleading because, looking at it, Chelsea obviously are flagged red, and I don't think you should get in Richarlison this week for that very reason. Burnley are highlighted as green. They can put in a tough performance, but their steely defence is kind of almost left them behind recently. I think only 4 clean sheets in their last 15 games. But then there's good games against Crystal Palace, Brighton, I'd say even Tottenham, definitely Arsenal, Aston Villa, and kind of going into the end of the season, the only red ones, the only difficult ones there that I would highlight are a game against Man City and a game against West Ham. It's a good run towards the end of the season, kind of maybe week on week building confidence, and Richarlison himself has great confidence at the moment, 2.99 XG over the last 2 game weeks, scoring 4 goals. It's been a great run for him. So in terms of it, I think they're both good ones to look at. If there was assurances over Jesus starting, I would get him over Richarlison. But at the moment, Richarlison, I've not been keen on Everton kind of assets through this season, but I think actually Richarlison is doing well at his price point and maybe replacing that DCL component as a part of many players' teams. So I think he's not a bad one to have a look at there, Ben.
Yeah, Richarlison seems to be benefiting from a slight formational tweak by Carlo Ancelotti, or shall I say maybe a slight tweak in his role. Ancelotti is sacrificed some of DCL's attacking play, and he swapped it around, and he sort of removed the defensive side of Richarlison's, and he just wants to focus on him going forward. He does believe that he's got a goal scorer on his books. He alluded to the fact that injury and suspension at the start of the season did hamper him. He wasn't quite 100% in terms of his sharpness, but it looks as if the Brazilian's going to have finish the season strongly. And so I do like Richarlison. He is a player that could potentially come in on my wild card when I decide to pull the trigger on that. I do own Gabriel Jesus. But as with all of Pep's players in double game weeks and the Champions League coming up, there is that rotation risk. And the fact that he scored 2 goals midweek certainly does not guarantee, there's no guarantees ahead of that derby on Sunday. The worry for me is he played 90 minutes. We've seen Sergio Aguero, who did start the first game of double game week 26. And maybe you would have expected Aguero to be introduced and again just build upon those and integrate back up. But he stuck with Jesus and he got a late goal. Much to the pleasure of Jesus owners, and that was a great return. But will he start both games in this double game week? I'd be very, very surprised. He's not a shoe-in like a fully fit Sergio Aguero would be. He would always be first choice. I just think Jesus is a bit part support player, unfortunately, and he may feel he's still got an opportunity to go out there and prove that he's big enough and good enough to fill the boots of Aguero, if Aguero is to leave at the end of the season. But I almost think that ship's already, sailed. Jesus will just always be a backup to whoever City decide to bring in, and I would expect them, to go out maybe and splash the cash big time in the summer, and whether Jesus would be happy with that, to sit as a bench and take his opportunities as and when, or maybe he feels it's time to move on as well, and City may look to somebody like Delap as backup, and then if they're not available, as we've seen in the past, Sterling, Bernardo, Mahrez, Foden, all happy and comfortable in playing that false nine.
So that is the end of our discussions here in terms of the FPL attackers. And as always, I say thanks to you for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe and share the Premier Injuries channel, because we've got some great content for you. But for now, we'll just say see you next week and good luck with your teams.
Yeah, good luck, guys. Thanks for following. Thank you for subscribing. Well, you better have subscribed anyway. And we'll see you again very, very soon. But from me and the main man, Jason McKenna, we're out and we're done. Good luck in game week 27.